Jihad is gentle. Jihad is kind. Jihad is all just in your mind. That's what they tell us anyway, but then the bombs go off, and us they slay. That's why we're here. That's why we speak, to warn of jihad from here to Mozambique. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to This Week in Jihad with the great David Wood. I am Robert Spencer, author of the Holy Quran, and David is, of course, the world's foremost Christian apologist and critic of the religion of peace. Welcome, David. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. From here to Mozambique, we are glad to see you.
Yeah, Robert's going to, you're going to need to put that together into a book.
An epic poem.
How many do you have now?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to count 10 or 12, I guess.
So you've got a bunch of books out there, and but it would be cool, right? If like people look you up on Wikipedia, look up your description, and it says, you know, he's Islamophobe, he's this, he's this, and a poet.
Yes.
That'd be cool.
Well, I know it. I hope I don't blow it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to have to think about that. You know, poetry, it's a serious thing. It's a very serious matter. In any case, David, there's a lot of jihad. Shall we start with the ever-popular stupid infidels of the week?
Gotta have my stupid infidels.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There are, of course, as always, every week, a plethora of stupid infidels, a veritable cornucopia of stupid infidels, and I think we might be best advised to start. Well, I see, you know something, you are unidentified today. Why is that? That's funny. It's never happened before. Your name is not on the screen. I don't know why that is. I mean, everybody knows you are David Wood, but it's just not there. And since we are
it was a totally different setup and so on. So
okay, these things happen.
In fact, if people can even hear me right now, I'm impressed, because this was all sort of I sort of patched everything together for a debate the other day, and then anyway, had
we can hear you,
things, but
we can see
I was
you.
Anticipating.
We just don't know who you are because your name's not there underneath. So some guy is here with us today, and we're going to discuss the stupid infidel capital of the world, which is, of course, Rotherham or Rotherham in the UK, where 1,400.
Hold on.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was just, when you said Rotherham, I was gonna ask if that was the place where year after year after year these gangs were going around grooming, drugging, raping, gang raping, pimping young British girls, and the authorities knew about it. Social workers, police, prosecutors, they all knew about it, but they were all so terrified of being called racists or Islamophobes that they just let it happen. In other words, if you're in a situation, this is the message of the authorities in Rotherham. If you are completely aware of guys gang raping 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, but if you say something about it, you'll be called names, you look the other way and just ignore it for years. Until you're exposed and it becomes so embarrassing that you're basically forced to do something about it. Then maybe you do something about it. Is that the city you're talking about, Robert?
That's it, man. Rotherham is where they say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will really hurt me. And so they were so afraid, as you noted, of being called Islamophobic. At least 1,400 girls were victimized, their lives destroyed. By the way, we do know who you are now. I figured out what was missing there, and now it says, ladies and gentlemen, David Wood. Anyway,
no one troubleshoots tech problems like Robert Spencer.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's really anyway.
So Islamophobe, poet, tech genius.
I want that on my tombstone. Remember that. Anyway, what we have here in Rotherham is further confirmation of what you just said. because there are ongoing investigations. And now, as it turns out, there were counselors, that is local, like city councilmen, we would call them in America, I believe, and they knew and remained silent about the Muslim rape gangs for precisely the reasons that you outlined. So it wasn't just the police. It was also the city authorities. And so we have here in the chat a very apropos quote, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph in the world is when good men do nothing." You could put that on the tombstone of Rotherham in the UK. And so they are the stupid infidel capital of the world, the undisputed champion. Of course, they do have quite a lot of competition, so perhaps I shouldn't say that they're totally undisputed. Kind of ironic story came out of Ireland, right next door, this past week, David. There was a demonstration in Dublin in favor of open borders. The Irish authorities are under fire for letting in so many migrants. There are some Irish who think this is unwise, that at very least these people should be vetted, something. And so there was a demonstration on the other side of people who think open borders are great. Everybody should come in. This is not really a country. This is just sort of a parking lot for whoever wants to pass through. And they held a demo, and I thought that the demo, David, turned into kind of a parable of the logical outcome of these kinds of policies. Because right behind the demonstrators protesting in favor of open borders and chanting their open borders slogans and singing their open borders songs came a group of Muslims marching and screaming. What were they yelling, David?
I have to go with Allahu Akbar.
Yes. Once again, you got it right on the money. And they were holding signs, protesting. What do you think they were protesting, David?
There are several things. I'd probably go with Israel.
Israel is a very good guess, but this is the very first time, I think, on the history of this program. That's right. They were protesting against Quran burning.
Oh, okay, yeah. That actually made more sense in light of recent events.
Yes, and so I thought this is a very direct insight into the consequences of unvetted mass migration. Not a hippy-dippy, diverse, multicultural society where everybody loves one another and rides unicorns together, but the supremacy of Islam and Sharia. Demonstrations against the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, cries of Allahu Akbar, which is a declaration of supremacy over all other religions and the people who hold to them. It was a vivid illustration of what is to come, what Ireland has in store in its future, although so few there are aware of it.
Hey, you know what you might need to do? You might need to eventually have could have an Olympics, a Stupid Infidels Olympics.
A sort of a special, very special Olympics.
Or you could even do a weekly thing where if you go through like 4 or 5 stupid infidel stories, you could have people vote on who is the dumbest.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It would be hotly contested.
Yeah, I believe you could do in the chat. So you could actually poll people on who the dumbest infidel of the week is, and
suddenly you got an echo. Everything was fine, and then you began to echo.
Tech problems.
That was fine. Let's just plow on.
Yeah, sometimes temporary. So.
Yes. Okay. So in the UK, since we're in the UK and its environs, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ireland is not the UK, but it's near it, and that's something that many Irish find objectionable. But they think they had troubles before. Just you wait. Anyway, in the UK itself is part of the ongoing investigations into the PREVENT program, their counter-terror program. It came to light that Musharraf Hussain, the leader of a group in Nottingham. Nottingham isn't that where Robin Hood was from? And now Musharraf Hussain is the robbing from the rich and giving to the poor there because he received $238,000. That's 200,000 pounds from Prevent. But meanwhile, he has referred to Hamas as a legitimate resistance group. And so this terrorist organization that glories in the killing of civilians, he says is a legitimate group. And meanwhile, on the other side, he's raking in 200,000 pounds from the people who are supposed to be fighting terrorism in the UK. Musharraf Hussain, a smart jihadi, not a dumb infidel.
It's I mean, at this point, you have to say people deserve what they get. I'm not saying terrorist attacks, you deserve it, so on. But if you're literally handing money to people who are promoting and defending Hamas, it's like, what are you expecting?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So there's more out of the UK. It's stupid UK week here, I think, but we'll see how things develop. It's still early. This study, of Prevent, we spoke about this last week, that there was an independent study of the Prevent counterterror program, and it found that they were not speaking honestly about jihad, that they had no recognition of Islamist terrorism in this program because, of course, it would be Islamophobic. The program was found to be not doing enough to fight Islamist extremism, as it called it. So what do you think has been the response? Amnesty International has actually denounced the report about Prevent. What do you think they think is wrong with it, David?
I don't know here.
Yeah? It's not really as tough as it might seem. Amnesty International is upset about this report because the report says that the Prevent program is not doing enough to fight Islamist extremism. So Amnesty International says this report is Islamophobic.
Islamophobic, yeah,
yes,
not doing
course.
enough.
That's right. And so Ilyas Nagdi, who is the racial justice director for Amnesty International UK, says this review is riddled with biased thinking, errors, and plain anti-Muslim prejudice. Frankly, the review has no legitimacy. And I wonder if anybody is considering at all, anywhere in the UK, in any tiny hovel somewhere, whether maybe just possibly Ilyas Nagdi is a bit prejudiced in this regard and is not exactly an unbiased observer.
No, of course not, because that would be Islamophobic, and that's the root of the problem. It seems like any organization, it really seems like, in order to please, groups like Amnesty International and any other groups, it seems like the only thing that any group can be concerned with is Islamophobia. That's the only thing you're allowed to be bothered by. You can't be at all bothered by jihad or the people who are promoting it or the people who are promoting it online or the people who are saying do it now or the people who are saying you should be preparing behind the scenes and learning how to fight behind the scenes. You can't be concerned about that at all. You can only be worried about Islamophobia and going after them. Otherwise, you are part of the problem.
Indeed. Interesting sidelight on that, David. It came to light that a Polish politician, as a matter of fact, the former foreign minister of Poland, Radoslaw Sikorski, has been paid regularly over the last few years by the United Arab Emirates. And he's received $500,000 from the United Arab Emirates, $100,000 a year for the last 5 years, just for being such a sweet guy. And you know, I saw that. I started to wonder if maybe some of the stupid infidels are not all that stupid. They're paid infidels. They are infidels who are profiting from be taking on the guise of stupid infidels.
Yeah, and so it seems like, here's what it seems like. It seems like most of them, most of the dumb infidels, you can get what you want out of them just by manipulating them. And so you praise them when all they're worried about is Islamophobia. And if they're at all concerned about, raping girls or anything like that, then you shower them with charges of racism and bigotry and Islamophobia, and you can control massive numbers. It seems like you can almost control entire civilizations just with that, just this praising and abusing, and you can control lots of people like that. But maybe there are people who don't fall for that so easily. They're aware of how manipulation tactics are being used, and so for them, you actually got to cough up some money. You actually got to start sending them some serious cash to get that. But either way, people ultimately do what you want.
It raises some interesting historical questions, like in Vienna in 1683, and another Pole, Jan Sobieski, faced down the Ottomans and defeated them on September 12th, 1683. And that was the high water mark of Ottoman expansion into Eastern Europe. Now, the question is, what if the Ottomans had called Jan Sobieski Islamophobic?
Well, he'd have invited them in.
Yep. Looks like it.
I'm sorry. I don't want you to call me a name, so by all means, come on in.
And if Jan Sobieski turned out to be made of stronger stuff, maybe the Ottomans could have offered him some cash.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, if you're offering me some money to subjugate my entire people, well, as long as I'm okay, that's all that matters. Isn't that sick stuff for the people who are doing this, right? Like, they're selling future generations off for cash.
That's right. And speaking of which, we have the European Union. And you'll be happy to know, David, that they have just appointed a new coordinator for combating Islamophobia.
Yay!
Just like in Canada.
Finally.
Canada just got their Islamophobia czar, or czarina, Amina El-Gawabi. And now the EU Commission has Marion Lalisse. She is the new coordinator for combating Islamophobia, a French-born European Union official with previous diplomatic experience in Yemen, Mauritania, and Morocco. And her most recent post was distributing aid to Turkish Cypriots, that is, to the part of Cyprus that is occupied illegally by Turkey since 1974. And so the appointment of Marion Lalisse has been hailed by a George Soros-funded NGO as holistic, comprehensive, goal-oriented, and intersectional approach in countering Islamophobia. And you know what all that verbiage means. There will be no more honest talk about jihad violence. Islamophobia is a trick. It's a sleight of hand, because it's used to refer to attacks on innocent Muslims that nobody supports, and also to honest discussion of the motivating ideology behind jihad violence. And by saying that they are fighting against the one, the vigilante attacks against innocent Muslims, they use it to silence the honest discussion like what we are having right now about jihad violence.
Classic bait and switch. And it's weird. I mean, if we didn't know from experience how well this works, and you were to tell me, hey, here's what's going to happen. Jihadis are going to be blowing up buildings and blowing up trains and blowing up buses and slaughtering people, and they're going to have their playbook. You're going to have open access to their playbook. It's all going to be written right there, and you're going to have 14 centuries of history to look at and see exactly what the plan is. and their own words today, because we've got them. We've got them recorded. They say it in YouTube videos. They say what their plans are in YouTube videos. But we're going to appeal to the goodwill of Westerners, and we're going to say, hey, you don't approve of randomly slaughtering or persecuting or attacking people who aren't doing any of that, do you? And you go, no. And they're like, okay, well, that's Islamophobia, when people go around and just randomly slaughter Muslims in the streets. You're against that, right? Yeah, of course. So would you be okay if we combat Islamophobia? Sure. Yeah, of course you need to combat Islamophobia. Oh, thank you. Oh, by the way, our real definition of Islamophobia is anyone who says anything critical of Islam or jihad or anything else that's connected at all. Anyone who ever questions anything we do while we're slaughtering and raping and all that other stuff is an Islamophobe. But thank you for giving us the power to silence all the people who are actually concerned.
That's where we are. That's what's happening. And so the EU has one, Canada has one, that is Islamophobia czars, Islamophobia chiefs, and more countries are certain to follow. All right, now we have France. In France, there was a young man from Bangladesh staying at a youth hostel in Bruay-la-Buissière or someplace. And he attacked the caretaker there with a knife while saying, what do you think, David? What might he have been saying?
Allahu Akbar.
It's a wild guess, but somehow you've gotten it.
Wow.
Anyway, he has been sentenced for attacking the caretaker with a knife, which is essentially attempted murder. He did not answer or cooperate with the proceedings at the trial at all. He was on trial for intending to kill, and he got 30 months in prison. So he'll probably be there for about a year, and then he'll be out on the streets again, able to wage more jihad.
Just like so many ISIS jihadis who are about to be released, who are being released back onto the streets.
Indeed. And then we go over to Germany. Always a good place for stupid infidels. And this story goes back to June 2022.
Du hast recht.
Yeah, you went silent there for a minute.
Did I? You didn't hear my
Yeah.
Du hast recht.
I did hear that, that was all.
Oh, okay. Oh, we're good then.
Okay. It's a little buggy, I think, but we'll make it through. Anyway.
Yeah, I just want to find out. If that's on my end or your end, because that would affect the problem solving.
Everything looks the same here, but what do I know? Anyway. In Germany, we have, in Köln, Hassan H. Actually, this was in Bonn. This guy's on trial in Cologne, but it took place in Bonn. Why he's not on trial in Bonn, I don't know. But anyway, he is famous now because he cut off the head of his friend and he threw it in front of the district court in Bonn. For that, he got 1.5 years in prison. And now he's back in court. And he was back in court because he went to an office where he introduced himself to one of the employees as the man who cut off a man's head in Bonn. And then he threatened the employees in this office that he would cut off their heads also. And so he is back in court and he explains, I was angry. I told them about the crime, but he denies actually threatening anyone. He was just trying to get a job, David. Can't you give a man an honest break?
But I mean, notice the hey guys, I'm trying to get a job, and I'll chop all your heads off like I did that other guy. You'd think that's a pretty insane way to go about it, but I mean, if you've been conditioned by years of seeing all you have to do is threaten people to get your way and they'll immediately back down and give you anything you want, why wouldn't you try that, right? Why wouldn't you? You've been programmed to get your way by doing that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That he might not even have known how crazy he was being. He might have figured, well, this is how I've always gotten what I wanted in Germany. So maybe if I tell them that I beheaded this guy and I'll threaten to behead them, they'll make me the Bundeskanzler.
Lisa Leto said, that's some resume.
Yes, indeed. I'd like to see it written out. It's the job offers are going to pour in.
Chop this dude's head off. You will be next if you don't give me job.
You're hired, my friend. Okay, so we actually have some real jihad, some violent jihad this week. Quite a lot, unfortunately. We have Cameroon. In Cameroon, there were fishermen who were going about their business and fishing in communities around Lake Chad in North Cameroon when Boko Haram, the jihad group that originated in Nigeria, came along and murdered 8 fishermen. Now, David, they were just fishing. Why on earth would Boko Haram, a group that wants to establish a caliphate in West Africa, want to kill ordinary guys who were just out fishing?
I mean, my goodness, there are multiple possible defenses depending on who the guys are. But anyone who is going to support potentially the military or the police that would stand in your way can be a target as well, because they're funding those who oppose you.
Also, they might want to just strike terror in the population.
That's true as well. Mm-hmm.
They're ultimately trying, of course, to destabilize the local government and law enforcement apparatus so that it falls, and they can then replace it with an Islamic State. Over in Syria, kind of a similar thing happened. About 75 people were out in the country in the Palmyra area, in the eastern countryside of Homs. And they were collecting truffles, which is a type of mushroom, I believe. And they were set upon by ISIS, the Islamic State, which summarily murdered 11 of them. Now here again, so we have fishermen in Cameroon, truffle hunters, mushroom collectors in Syria. And it's the same thing in both cases. Strike terror in the enemies of Allah, maybe strike against people they think are supporters of whatever regime they're trying to topple.
There might have been an added dimension for the truffle hunters because truffle hunters often use pigs.
Oh.
Pigs can smell the truffles, so they actually have trained pigs that go around and can sniff around and find the truffles, and then you dig them up.
David, you're a marvel. How does anybody know how you hunt truffles? And now you're going to tell me. Well, I was a truffle hunter in the... Yeah.
No, I saw it on a show about hunting truffles.
No, you're like 30 years old and you have this packed resume. Speaking of resumes, and done this and done that and done everything else, and it's very impressive. So you never know, you might have spent a few years hunting for mushrooms out there with pigs.
Yeah, it's on my resume and chopping heads off.
It's a winning combination. Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly Zaire, in Central Africa. 22 people in two separate attacks in villages in Congo, killed by the Allied Democratic Forces, which is a jihad group. Contrary to its name, the Allied Democratic Forces styles itself as ISIS, is the Islamic State in that area. Killed 22 people in separate attacks there. That is once again in service of trying to establish a caliphate. Now we come to some honest teachers of Islam. Now this is very rare. In the West, we have so many guys who are teachers of Islam who lie about it incessantly and constantly are gaslighting us and telling us that it does not teach what it plainly does teach if we open up the Quran and read the Hadiths and the Sirah of the Prophet. So it's refreshing, really, when we come upon somebody like Lotfollah Dejkam, who is the representative of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, in the Fars province of Iran. And Lotfollah Dejkam said in a Friday sermon last week, Jews, particularly Jews and Zionists, I don't know what he meant by that, Jews, particularly Jews, but that's what the transcript says, are presented in the Quran as your enemies. You see, recently they attacked our military site with one of their drones. They are your enemies. If you sit by and say that you want to befriend them, they will not become your friends. They want to destroy you. We have to get to know these enemies. Surely he can't be right, David, can he? The Quran doesn't say that the Jews are the enemies of the Muslims. The Quran says that the Jews love the Muslims and vice versa, right?
That would be incorrect, Robert. And it's actually interesting that he was more honest about what the Quran teaches, because it's very common for Muslims to say, "Oh, it's not Jews in general we have a problem with; it's just Zionist Jews." But that wasn't Jews that were in Muhammad's time that he had a problem with. He ended up just having a problem with Jews. At first, it was okay because the Jews would accept him as a prophet. Once they rejected him, then he's just got this generalized population. He's got this problem with this general population of Jews, and that was the case even before the reestablishment of Israel. So this is correct. Jews, and you could say, and particular, more. Well, let me put it this way: there's a general problem with Jews, but an even bigger problem for Zionists because they're under an additional death sentence. But that's similar to the boat that everyone's in, right? There's a general problem with unbelievers in general, but if you've done something to especially bother them, then you may be under multiple additional death sentences. But yeah. At least he's being honest.
Yes, he is. He actually referred to 2 Quran verses, because when he says, if you sit by and say that you want to befriend them, they will not become your friends, that is resonant of 551, chapter 5, verse 51 of the Quran. Do not take Jews and Christians as your friends. And then when he says that the Jews are presented in the Quran as your enemies, that is very clearly 582, chapter 5, verse 82, which says that the enmity runs most hottest among those who are Jews, the enmity toward the Muslims, that is. All right. Meanwhile, we have, I think we have some other honest jihadis. Oh yeah, this is out of France. This was a guy who, 41 years old, and he is identified in the news story, French language news story, as a Muslim and he is extremely entrenched in his religion. That is what the story says. And the upshot is that he wanted to take his daughters to morning prayers at the mosque at 5 a.m. The daughter, the partner, not the daughters, the partner refused. And so they started to argue. He punched her, and she was unable to work for 3 days. So he must have punched her pretty hard. After that, she filed a complaint. She wanted to leave him, and he was even angrier. He said, "A good Muslim does not divorce." This couple is from Morocco, and they were living in France. He started to force the family to learn Arabic and to memorize the first 12 chapters of the Quran. And I think it's interesting that they're from Morocco, and yet he's forcing them to learn Arabic. So they may be Berbers or something else, that their first language is not Arabic. But in any case, he's wanting them to learn Arabic, memorize the first 12 chapters of the Quran. Maybe their first language is French. He says, "If you continue to speak French, I will disfigure you," he said to his wife. And then his daughter is standing there, David, while he says, if you continue to speak French, I will disfigure you. And so he sees that his daughter is alarmed, and he says to her to reassure her, "It does not matter. Dad has the right to hit Mom, to educate her." Now surely that's un-Islamic, isn't it, David?
I don't know what Quran you've been reading, Robert. But it's actually a really bad situation, because if all we had to go on was the Quran, and it says, from those on whose part you fear rebellion or desertion or disobedience, or however they want to translate that, then there's this escalation. You warn them, you banish them to beds apart, and then you beat them. That would be enough to sound really, really bad. Because if you want to say, they want to say, what that means is tap them with a toothbrush. That doesn't sound like it makes sense, right? It's, wait a minute, I've warned you already, and now I'm escalating because that's not working. So I'm banishing you to a separate bed. And then if that's not working, then I'm taking the final strategy, tap you with a toothbrush. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense in the escalation of it that's in the passage. So anyway, that would be bad enough, and it would rule out enough reinterpretations if we just had the Quran to go on. But then when you factor in the Hadith, and you see how this is played out, and that you can actually beat a woman until her skin turns green, this guy is indeed entrenched in his religion. He knows what his religion teaches.
Mm-hmm. But his defense lawyer says that the prosecution is just trying to demonize the defendant. He's the real victim here, David. And the defense attorney says, "I have the impression that a Muslim terrorist is on trial." This guy's not a terrorist. He just threatened to disfigure his wife. It was all in the day, just a little family tiff. What's the big deal? The prosecutor doesn't seem to have any idea what's really going on either, because the prosecutor, whose name, by the way, is Khadija Ben-Bani, says that he's hiding his tyranny and machismo in the cloak of religion. So it isn't as if there's any tyranny and machismo in Islam, you see. It's that he's just using it as a pretext, and really Islam is wonderfully feminist. Isn't that right, David?
Yeah, and I would, gosh, if I were these, if I were like defense lawyers and stuff, I'd just go all in every time on accusing everyone of Islamophobia. And I would bring it up to the judge. I would bring it up to the jury. I would just be like, guys, It says right here. It says right here. This man can beat his wife. It says it. It says it as clear as day. He can beat her if he even thinks she might get out of line. So, if you say he can't do that or he's in trouble for doing what this book says, then you are against this book and you're calling Muhammad a prophet that shouldn't be listened to, and you're condemning 1.6 billion people who believe in this book. Is that what you're doing? Because that's what you're doing if you find if you find the defendant guilty.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
And watch how quickly they back down. No, we can't judge other cultures like that. We can't say that Muhammad's a false prophet. So, case dismissed, ladies and gentlemen. No further questions.
That kind of thing's coming. As a matter of fact, that's already here, really. It reminds me of the female genital mutilation trials that were going on in Michigan. And the judge threw them out, said this is freedom of religion issue. And that was that. So the poor victims have no recourse.
Wow.
Yep. All right, same thing in Bangladesh. A Hindu young man, Paritosh Sarkar, was accused of making blasphemous comments on Facebook. And he was sentenced this past week to 5 years in prison and fined 30,000 taka. I don't know how much 30,000 taka is. Maybe somebody can tell us in the comments. But in the meantime, he actually has a total, because he has separate sentences of 11 years in prison, but they're going to run concurrently. So it's going to be 5 years in prison for blasphemy, for hurting religious sentiments. Of course, since there's accusations of blasphemy, he could be killed by lynching at any time. But meanwhile, because of this case, because of allegations about his insulting Islam on Facebook, there was a Hindu village, a fishing village, actually, in Bangladesh. The entire village was burned down. 60 houses were torched. And the Muslim mob vandalized the village, looting the houses, taking away valuables and livestock, vandalizing the Hindu temples, breaking the idols, etc., etc., etc. Nobody has been imprisoned. Nobody has been charged. Only the alleged blasphemer, who is Hindu. It does seem like a two-tier justice system somehow, David, but that couldn't be, could it?
Yeah, but by the way, that is it's evil, but that's a brilliant strategy of, hey, if one guy does something, then we'll just go after tons of random people and so on. So if one guy does something, we'll just target, Hindus or whatever. It reminds me, I saw this when I was still a teenager, but there was a movie called Under Siege. Tommy Lee Jones takes over, I forget what it was, a battleship or something like U.S. battleship. He's a terrorist. And he gets on there, and then one of the American soldiers tries to stop them. And Tommy Lee Jones shoots him and then shoots the guy beside him. And then he goes, warning to everyone else, if you decide to be a hero, I will not only shoot you, I will shoot the person standing beside you. In other words, for people who are willing to put their lives on the line, might not be willing to put other people's lives on the line. And Islam seems to have a good feeling for that. If you want to risk blasphemy, okay. If you want to risk your life to blaspheme others, that's fine. But just so you know, we might burn entire villages down over this. So watch what you do.
Meanwhile, it's funny how there's so much blasphemy in places like Pakistan and Bangladesh. And I do wonder if there's room for introspection. Do any Muslims in Pakistan or Bangladesh ever stop to wonder why any minority group, any person from any minority group in either of those countries would ever want to blaspheme Islam? What is it that in their day-to-day lives they encounter that makes them think negatively about Islam? Why on earth would the religion of peace and tolerance that is so benign and cuddly, according to every last politician in the Western world, why would they think that it's not just paradise to live in an Islamic society?
Yeah, imagine you're a Christian family. You've got your 10-year-old daughter, and the local jihadis come over, take your daughter. They you try to get her back, you go to the judge. The judge says, "Nope, we have this signed document saying she willingly converted to Islam." What? My daughter can't write. Oh yeah, they wrote it for her. They wrote it for her, and basically you find out these guys can just come and take your daughters and anytime they can rape them, they can forcibly convert them, marry them off, and so on. And at some point, you start to get an idea that you don't like this ideology because of what it calls for in terms of your treatment. But then you say something against it, and oh, you criticized it. Now we have to either gather around and treat you like a pinata in the streets, or you get locked up for the rest of your life for criticizing it. But man, that's like, and what's amazing is, as you've talked about previously, there are Muslims calling for this in the West, right?
Hmm.
Like they want a global council to judge these cases of Islamophobia. And you look how it's handled in the places that have it, and they want to impose it everywhere. And then you look at places like Canada and all these other places, Europe, and we gotta get these special envoys on Islamophobia and everything. It's like, how are you not seeing what actually happens when these guys have this kind of power to punish people for blasphemy? How do you not get it? Because you're putting a lot of lives in danger.
Very much so. Excellent point. And that's a case in point comes to us once again from the UK. Four Afghan boys, ages 13 to 16, who arrived in the UK last year on boats across the English Channel. They have been charged in connection with the rape of a 15-year-old girl at the school that they attended in Dover. Now, what on earth, why would we talk about a story like that, David? There's rape all over the place, rape everywhere. Why would this one be something that would have to do with This Week in Jihad?
Well, almost all groups condemn rape. And so when some individual rapes someone, everyone can condemn what that person has done, but no one agrees with what that person has done. But in cases like this, where you have this entire ideology, which derives right from the Quran, that you can treat people outside of your religion like this, you can capture them, you can rape them, and so on. But basically, you can treat them like garbage because, as Surah 90 verse 6 says, they are the worst of creatures. No one cares what you do to a worm or a slug. So why not? So in this case, it's actually connected to the ideology.
Indeed. And yet, nobody in the UK is willing to look at that or to confront the ideology. And speaking of what these Western countries have brought upon themselves, there's news in the case of Sayfullo Saipov this week. You remember Sayfullo Saipov, David? He's the fellow who drove a truck along a bike path in New York City on Halloween night in 2017 and killed 8 people. And he is quite spectacularly unrepentant. He said he was inspired by ISIS, and he still believes in the Islamic State, and that it was the will of Allah that he carry out his attack. But he's facing the death penalty, and his lawyers are trying to prevent him from getting the death penalty. Now, I don't understand. Maybe his lawyers don't like him, so they don't want him to get the virgins. But he is trying not to get the death penalty, and they're saying that it's the fault of former U.S. President Donald Trump in speaking about the case at the time that the attack happened, and that he was a recipient of a diversity visa. And so the defense is now invoking that to say, well, we all know Trump is bad, therefore this guy should not get the death penalty, because Trump was using him to criticize the diversity visa and chain migration programs. And so that's all very well, but the question is, if this succeeds and these programs continue, how many more jihadis are we going to get? Is anybody paying attention? It would be Islamophobic to pay too much attention, would it not?
Yeah, it's always this. It's always the same. It's always some version of the exact same method. Whether it's the grooming gangs and convincing people not to complain about that or care here in the U.S. No matter how many terrorist attacks there are, you're a bigot if you bring it up in any way. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the direction I'd go if I were lawyers. I mean, you've got a guy who's ramming a truck into people. If any, I mean, in the name of his, so it's terror. That is a, guys, keep in mind, there's a difference between mass murder and terror. You could just, I'm angry one day and go kill a bunch of people. That's mass murder. If you do it to spread a message about your ideology, that's the terrorism category. And for, successful terrorists, people who actually kill people for their ideology, usually usually governments lean in favor of the death penalty as a deterrent to future ones. But man, if you could just say, but Islamophobia or but Donald Trump or something like that, yeah, probably be seeing more of that if this works at all.
Oh, yeah. Meanwhile, very similar story out, not similar to Saipov, but the one before it. In France, a 49-year-old Algerian migrant with 11 prior convictions. And so this all is of a piece, David, that, we bring in these people, we have no idea who they are, no concern about whether they're jihadis or not, or what their attitudes are toward infidel women and so on. And then they commit crime after crime, and everybody's too afraid of charges of Islamophobia to do anything about it. So this guy, 49 years old, 11 prior convictions. He comes up to a 13-year-old French schoolgirl walking along the street in Senon, Cenon, I don't know, southwestern France, and he starts to try to rape her in the middle of the street. But he is stopped by another teenager who tackled him and stopped him from raping the girl in the middle of the street. This is yet another example of what we see so often about so many of these guys' attitudes toward women who are not Muslim. How do they get this idea, David, that this is something that is acceptable behavior?
Notice the double idea, right? This guy has a double idea. He has two ideas. One from his religion and two from how we respond to his religion in the West. He had the idea that it is perfectly acceptable for him to go up and grab a girl and rape her. And two, he had the idea that no one's going to do anything about it. Because you are so cowardly. You are so cowardly. You're just going to let it happen. And I've seen Muslims bragging about that. We can do anything we want. They are too cowardly to stand up to anything we're going to do. And so, I mean, when you said someone intervened and actually stopped him, I'm actually like to the point where, I mean, think that it seems obvious that someone would do that, right? If you're just thinking, I mean, especially back in the day where people aren't going to allow that to happen. But given the way things have gone in recent years, I was actually impressed that someone jumped in and stopped the man from raping a girl. I was actually, wow, someone stepped in there and did something. I'm shocked that the person wasn't too worried about, what if I jump in and protect this girl from being raped? I'll be called an Islamophobe. That's exactly what we saw from British police.
Mm-hmm. The same kind of impunity we see in France also in yet another story. This guy who is yet another Muslim migrant. Actually, I'm not sure he's a migrant, but he is certainly a Muslim. Went to a church. Now, there are not many people who go to church in France, so lately I've been seeing so many stories like this. I wonder if there are more jihadis in churches than there are actually Christians praying.
Hey, whoa. Don't let me forget, because that might be a funny skit. We'll get a church in France. and the jihadis decide to attack it, and they run in there, Allahu Akbar! Hey, wait a minute, it's just us jihadis in here.
Yes. So this guy, he goes into a church in Paris, and he threatens to kill the priest. He had a machete. No, sorry, that's an older story out of Spain that we've already discussed. This guy just threatens to kill the priest. Nothing happened. Nobody stopped him. Nobody tackled him, but he didn't do anything. So he went out and went to another church and threatened to kill the priest there. I think that's a good indication of the impunity you're talking about, that some of these guys think they can do anything that they want and nothing will happen.
And we constantly confirm them as absolutely correct.
Yes, indeed. And also absolutely correct is an Islamic scholar out of Egypt, Dr. Atiya Adlan. Now, Atiya Adlan is unusually honest. We were talking earlier about honest Islamic clerics and scholars. And this is what Atiya Adlan said. We must make an effort and adhere to the explicit Quranic verses in order to strengthen the basic principles, okay? And so he goes on, O Muslims, the Book of Allah is before us, and it calls explicitly, loudly, and resoundingly to wage jihad for the sake of Allah in order to make Allah's word supreme. What does it mean to wage jihad for the sake of Allah? That means like getting the kids to school on time, right?
Yeah, that and going to the gym.
Yeah. Actually, waging jihad for the sake of Allah, that is a very specific concept in Islamic theology that relates to hot warfare against infidels for the sake of establishing the hegemony of Islam. All right, very quickly, we had a big vehicular jihad attack in Jerusalem in which a 6-year-old boy and an 8-year-old boy were killed. And then, of course, the handing out of sweets afterward. We have the erosion of the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's been a great slowdown in news out of the Islamic Republic as they've cracked down on the stories getting out. But the second in command of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is often called the Iranian Revolutionary Guards or just Revolutionary Guards in the Western press, but the official name is the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, but because they're a terror group, the Western press tries to cover for them. They say that their group, a lot of people in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards are experiencing doubt and confusion, so that's a very positive sign.
Yeah. Did you see? Did you see they exiled their best female chess player?
No, I missed the chess player. Didn't
Yeah.
wear a
So
hijab?
yeah. So a while back, she was at a tournament and refused to wear the hijab as a sign of solidarity with the women who are protesting, and Iran exiled her. They said, if you come back to this country, we're going to arrest you. So now she's not allowed back into the country. And she's living in Spain. And I was like, wait, you think that's punishment? Like you can't come back. You can't come back to Iran.
Yeah, you have to live in Spain.
But I mean, think about this. She's a woman. Her category is woman grandmaster. So she's an international master and a woman. So one of their smartest young women in the country, and courageous, right? I mean, when someone's saying, hey, I know what I can face by protesting against this regime and I'm going to do it anyway. She understands she is putting her life on the line. So notice who Iran does not want in their country. Smart, courageous women. You guys got to stay in Europe or something. Interesting.
Sounds like a Nazi Germany, and all the brilliant people who were Jewish ended up working in other countries for the benefit of other countries instead of helping out Germany, and well, we're all better off for it. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the hour, David, so there's plenty more jihad, but we can try to catch up next week. It's interesting that we got to so few things this week. There's so much more because this was actually a short week. We were on Thursday last week and we only had 6 days in between instead of the usual 7. But the jihadis have been very busy, and Ramadan is coming in just a few weeks. So strap in, folks. It's going to be a rough ride, but pray, hope, and don't worry once again. And God willing, we'll see you again with more jihad. Well, not that we want the jihad, but you get the idea. Next week.
I get it.